All right, so we're going to continue with Matthew. So if you want to turn, we're going to go right on to Matthew 5, 27 through 30. So we're going to start right there. So I'm going to give a recap just so we're all continuing in the same story. This is one continuously long sermon. So Jesus, right, he's been announcing the arrival of the kingdom of God, and that's the whole story of Matthew, right? It's proclaiming and this reclaiming of a world where humanity in the garden kind of takes it and we continue to trash it and trash the world and trash each other. And so in Jesus, he's talking about this new reign, this new rule, new humanity that Jesus is starting to form around himself with his teachings. And so he's calling the followers to himself, and he's shaping this new environment that he calls the kingdom of upside-down values. So living, in this upside-down world, driving on the left side of the road. If you remember this metaphor, you're going to have collisions because we live opposite from how the world sees it, these upside-down values. We're in the middle of these 6 little phrases that Jesus uses. And it's, you've heard it said, but I tell you. He's going to do this 6 times. This 6 times. We're in the middle of it, this announcement of the kingdom, of what this looks like when disciples follow him and rediscover what humanity was made for. And so of these 6 sections, Jesus is filling out something that he sees quoted in the scriptures. And he says, I'm not here to undermine the law. I'm going to create a people of the kingdom. These new Jeremiah 31, like restoring the heart, where it's all written in there. And these commands come in there to be fulfilled. So he quotes Old Testament scriptures, and specifically from probably the 10 of the law, the 600 whatever that you know, the 10 commandments. He starts with those. And he says, you've heard it said in the law, but I tell you, and then he gives his new teaching. Right? It's not a rejection, right? It's not an antithesis. So remember last week, he said, you've heard it said you shouldn't murder, right? He didn't say, but I tell you the antithesis of that, go ahead and murder, right? He's not destroying or changing it. He's just adding fulfillment. He's bringing full understanding, right? It's not don't murder. It's that when you destroy the humanity of someone, even in here, when harbor hatred against them, you're in essence destroying what makes them human. This difficult thing. So teaching calls all of Jesus' disciples into seeing that these commands are even more radical, right? Than the original command, right? The original command fulfills the purpose, right? Don't murder. Great, that would be right in line with the will of God, not to murder people, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. So with murder last week, this week we're going to explore Jesus' teaching about sexual desire. So nothing really substantial, controversial, or difficult to stand in front of a room of people and talk about in today's culture. Nothing at all. I certainly didn't sweat bullets writing this. I'm making sure I was like, did I say everything the way that I was hoping to get it across? So I'm going to start by just saying this. Something I said a few weeks ago. And I think this will help us get through these sections here together. These 6 sections are Jesus' teaching where I said he's really going to be getting into our business personally. Do you remember me saying that? He's going to get into your business personally, and might be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. When the topics of sex and marriage and Jesus pops up, I expect that over today, hopefully, right, there might be an enormous amount of discussion, conversation maybe even controversy, debate amongst people sitting in this room. That would be amazing, right? And I think that's good, right? Because that means we're making moves towards what Jesus is saying. We're engaging with it, and we're letting it challenge us. Whereas you walk out and you go, I was a little perturbed by blank, blank, blank. And that's good. That means you're getting something grinding against you. Like last week, if you were like, Phil said it's not okay for me to be mad, but I'm currently mad at my neighbor because blank, blank, blank. You feel your gears grinding a little bit? You feel it? That's a good thing. That means something's happening. So I just want to say, and I'm going to name something that's happening right now whenever churches talk about this, probably even in here a little bit. And not just for today, but all of these different Sundays. I want to put this in your brain to think about. As we move in and around these different things. There's lots of different people who are part of this church and the Christian community around. Everyone say, different types of people exist in this world. Is that good? Good, perfect, great. Some of us, we've got probably a good chunk in this room that would say, I'm a pretty devoted follower of Jesus. You don't have to put your hands up, right? Well, I'm trying, I've come to terms with who Jesus is and kind of what he said he's done and what he did for me, right? And I'm going to do my darndest to follow him. And the teachings, they're hard, right? Not murdering, fine. Not being angry, okay, that's harder, right? They're difficult, but you're kind of all in on it. You're gonna work towards this, right? There's others that grew up what I call this is a word I enjoy. Churchianity. Everyone say churchianity. Good. There's some of us that grew up around churchianity, which is kind of like general religiosity, right? This sort of upbringing that I would say is very legalistic, but is like it's a mile wide and about a centimeter deep in understanding anything with what Jesus' teachings are. And we grew up around that, and so maybe you bailed on that, or you've had some of that broken down, and now you're like a young adult, any age, and maybe you're coming back, you're saying, hey, I'm going to try to figure this whole Jesus thing out, right? But the problem is this butts up against what happens in our society, which is that Christians make a really big deal out of sex and marriage and all the stuff in it. It's a big deal, right? There's some of us, though, we didn't even grow up around churchianity. And you're maybe just processing Jesus for the first time. And you probably, if you had to write down on a piece of paper, would you say that you're a Jesus follower, you would have a hard time checking the yes box. You're kind of like in between the yes and no box, or even in the no box. That's fine. Here's the point. We're all here today, and we're going to be looking at I think some of the most difficult teachings that Jesus has about the most personal issues, and through these 6. Today's one that's pretty controversial for our culture. So I'm going to frame this in a way that's going to be helpful for everyone to approach this. Jesus is saying these words to people who have chosen to follow him. You with me? Remember, there's all these people, they're injured, they're lame, they're on the outside. Lame as in they're not like they're lame, right? I'm from a long time ago where lame had a different meaning. Okay. See, that's a 90s thing. Good. Okay. And so they're the outcasts of society, but they're people who have left things to follow him. He's got some of these disciples. They're not disciples yet, the 12, but they're starting to follow him, and he's saying these things to them. And he's talking to them that they're starting to reckon with who he is. They've chosen to identify and follow him in some way. And if that's not you, if you wouldn't call yourself a Christian or a disciple in that sense, then you're not actually the primary audience of this teaching. Great. This raises an important issue. One of the problems that the church in America has taken is making the issues of the Christian views on sex and marriage the front burner issue for bringing people into faith. It's like the very front burner thing. It's the first conversation that you have with someone who's not a follower of Jesus for some reason. That is, everyone, this is a great phrase. Everyone say, cart before the horse. Great. Cart before the horse. Right. Cart way before the horse. If someone is not a disciple of Jesus, why on earth would they be compelled to follow his teaching when it comes to any area of life, much less their marriage or sexuality? Are you with me? The most important issue to be thinking about when you hear these, you've heard it said, but not, let's do this and let's fulfill it. It's not particularly the topic at hand. It's not like murder, anger. It's not there. The particular thing we want to be listening for is who is Jesus, what is he doing, and what type of people is he trying to shape? What would the kingdom look like with a community full of people like this? You with me? This is what we're going to get at. If it's not aimed at you, the aim point is here. Who is Jesus? What is he doing? You with me? Great. Jesus is about to make a lot of us very uncomfortable today. Let's turn to Matthew 5 and read verse 27. Matthew 5:27. Page 1594. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. He begins just like he did and we'll do the other 6 times. So again, what is he quoting that we're pretty familiar with? The 10 Commandments. He's quoting them right there. You shall not commit adultery. That's one of our 10 Commandments. He assumes you've heard that before. This audience has grown up, again, in the synagogue. They know the 10 Commandments. You shan't murder, don't use the Lord's name in vain, don't commit adultery, respect your father and mother, right? And he says it in a way that's really familiar to what was said to them so many times. Like that is completely right. Don't commit adultery. That is a reliable indicator of God's will. That's what the Torah says. That's what the law is there for. They're pointers to the will of God and the people of Israel in this covenant. And just like last week, he doesn't give us an antithesis, right? You don't murder. He doesn't say, go ahead and do it, okay? We're not going to get to an antithesis. He doesn't say this is bad or stupid or outdated. But he just goes on and he's going to set his teaching right next to it. Don't commit adultery, 5:28. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So he sets his teaching right alongside it. He's not going to do away with it. He's explaining and fulfilling it, putting it right there. Remember last week we talked about he has this authority to what seems like he's adding to this law, this authority that they're amazed by, and he's fulfilling it fully. He says, being a part of the kingdom isn't about modifying your behavior, right? It's about allowing Jesus to begin to work at the core root issues. So last week, don't murder, fine. Core root issue, don't be angry, right? So we're going to get on a new core root issue. That these root issues resolve in us behaving and doing things that fracture the relationship with God and with other people. It's degrading of humanity and the humanity of other people. This is what we're getting at, rewriting the heart, right? Jesus wants to remove those deep issues of the heart and reform us as Jeremiah 31. We're going to write the law in their hearts. We're being reformed in this way. So here we go. Right? Anyone who looks at a woman or a man lustfully has committed adultery with her or him. I like to add those in. Let's make it for everybody in this room. Jesus is fulfilling the purpose of this command, this issue of the heart. So what do we do when Jesus turns the heat up a little bit? Right? Last week, don't be angry. It's just like committing murder. You shuffle in your chair a little slightly, right? Right? How about this week? Anyone shuffle in their chair ever so slightly? Just the micro, you're that little uncomfortable shuffle, you with me? This is an issue of the heart. Underneath it, there's this whole view of Jesus' view of marriage and sexuality. This whole view, this worldview that he has is shaped by what he sees in the scriptures. So later on in Matthew, this question is going to come up again to him. There's a very short little section here. It's going to be framed to him again by the Sadducees, the Pharisees. And he's going to discuss, he's going to answer it in kind of a weird way. So it begins, they say, whatever. And he starts to discuss about how humanity reflects the image of God when they come together in a relationship. So it begins with this one humanity, but there's this distinct thing about it that reflects the image of the Creator when we're in relationship. So last week, just being in relationship with friends and being angry, it fractures that relationship. So this idea that if God is 3 in 1 and 1 in 3 with this indistinguishable barriers but that are distinguishable, there's a relationship that makes God God. You with me? And so humanity in the image of the Creator reflects that need to be in relationship. And so there's this vision about human life. So Jesus sees this covenant, this connection between humans so sacred and beautiful and significant that if you destroy or wreck that bond in some way, it becomes a distortion of what it means to be a human. Are you with me? You break that in anger, you're distorting what it means to be a human. To be a human means you are in relationship with people around you. This is Jesus' pulling this out of the scriptures. So he cites this command, don't commit adultery. In this case, ending up in the bed with someone who's not your covenant partner in some way. But for Jesus, that doesn't get near enough to the issue at the heart. Okay? Someone stands before God at some point in their life, and a whole bunch of people, or their friends and their family, and they make life commitments. They promise to be faithful with someone. They say, we're going to do this together. I'm with you. You're with me. And then one day, 1 week, 1 year, 10 years later, suddenly they're not in bed with their covenant partner. How does that happen? Maybe one time out of 1,000. It's because they just woke up one day and they're like, you know what I'm going to do today? you know what's going to happen today? No, right? It's a simmering burn of the heart. You with me? It's a slow simmer. It's you don't just very rarely do you just wake up one day and you're I don't know, I'm going to go kill someone today. Right? Normally there's a bit, it's a build up to it. It's the same idea here. Slow simmering of the heart issue. So Jesus says there's root things going on in this person's story, in their mind and their heart, that comes to fruition when it comes to this final action. And so Jesus goes upstream of this behavior to get to this core issue and locates it right in the heart. If you've ever been around the church, you have probably heard verse 28 before. I'm going to read it again. You've probably heard this before. But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in their heart. You probably have heard it before, and Jesus' teachings, they feel like they're so simple, but there's a bottomless lake in terms of depth and implications with this. So we're going to camp in verse 28 for the next, I don't even know. We're just going to camp right in this verse for a little bit. He says, it's not about ending up in the bed with somebody else. It's not what it's about. He locates it upstream. Anyone who even looks at them lustfully. What does that mean, right? What does that even mean? Our English word for look is terrible. Everyone say English is bad. English bad. It's really hard to understand the Bible in English sometimes. Really bad. It's kind of a funny word, okay? Because I can look at you like this. You guys ready? I'm going to look at all of you. I'm going to do you ready? Cindy, I'm going to pick you out right now. You ready? I'm going to look at Cindy. Ready? Here we go. Everyone watch. Did I just look at Cindy? Yes. Okay, great. Someone's alive. Good. I just looked at her, right? What might we call that in English? What's a better word for what I just did? What did I do? Like, glance. Ooh. What a better word, right? The look doesn't really have a great distinguish between it. Because you could also say, I looked at her, right? I looked at Cindy, right there. You with me? Great. But it could also be like this. You ready, Cindy? I'm sorry, in advance. Ready? It could also be like this. Ready? Did I just look at Cindy? Right? I'm sorry. She's like, oh my gosh, make it. Look at somebody else, Adam. No, so, but it's the same thing. I could look at her and I could look at her. What might we call this instead? Staring. Ooh, what a better word, right? There's no distinction with this word look, okay? Think of what Jesus said last week with murder, though, okay? He said, anyone who's angry with someone else has committed murder in their heart. So Jesus isn't talking about just the action or the instance, right? It's the harboring of feelings that's the same as the action. Remember that from last week? So let's bring that into this week. So here, Jesus is not talking about the instance of a look. This is not what he's saying. Anyone who does this, right? You with me? It's not that, okay? But he's talking about an ongoing and sustained look. The same as acting on those looks and thoughts. Are you with me? We're getting more like this. Okay, we're good? We're going to keep adding to it. English has a better word for that, and you guys said an ongoing awkward look is a perfect. Great. Stare. Staring for what? Let's read it again. But I tell you, anyone who stares at a woman, ooh, okay, great. Lustfully. Now the NIV says lustfully. The NASB says with lust. The NRSV says with lust again. And then the ESV says with lustful intent. I think that's the best translation of it. So the ESV captures this precise point of what Jesus is getting at. It's the intent and purpose. So I wrote down the Phil translation Bible of this verse. I translated this myself. This is how Phil would translate it. Anyone who stares at a woman or man in order to fuel their own sexual desire. You with me? Are we all playing the same game now? Great. So what Jesus is talking about is not looking and noticing that someone is attractive. I have news for everyone in this room. That happens. Hi, raise your hand. I'm a human. I appreciate things that are beautiful. Great. You're a human. It happens. There's beautiful people in this world that reflect God's image. That's not what Jesus is getting at. What he's getting at is the choice that's before you after you notice. Do you choose to refocus? Or do you do something with it that's deep and internal inside of you to foster and fuel something else? That's what the word lust means. We're playing the same game now. Great. It's not abstract, right? Jesus' followers, they're listening to this, they'd get it. If you've been a victim of this stare before, you know exactly what Jesus is talking about. If you've done the stare before, you know exactly what Jesus is talking about. Are you with me? What he's saying is this is yet another behavior. Ending up in bed with somebody else that's not your covenant partner, that's an action. But that's just a symptom of something deeper. That even the sustained stare, in order to fuel something, that little movie in your head, is a symptom. The deepest issue is the issue, right, of committing adultery with others in their hearts. This is where Jesus locates this problem. So what Jesus is getting at, it's really intense, right? He's at the fact that there's something going on inside of you that nobody else gets to see. It's really easy to detect once the secret's out. Right? It's really easy once that's happened. Once the secret's out and you can catch that. Right? You end up with somebody else somewhere, that's fine. You do the awkward stare, you notice people doing the awkward stare, and someone doing it, you're being like followed down the sidewalk, that kind of thing's also noticeable, and you're a little embarrassed or whatever. But what he's getting at here is that movie that only you get to see in your head. You with me? No one knows. I mean, who knows if you're doing that? You can't detect an utterly private matter. And so Jesus says the issue is not with the noticing, it's with the choice of what you do in the notice. Martin Luther summarizes really great. I said this to Ashley, we walked through this last night to make sure I didn't stand up here and say something really dumb. I found this quote from Martin Luther, and I think it's going to really pull this together for us. This is what Jesus is getting at. So don't make this a big bowstring of Jesus' teaching, that you can't be tempted, right? And then you're eternally damned or whatever. This is the quote from Martin Luther. I can't stop a bird from flying over my head. Everyone say that. I can't stop a bird from flying over my head. Good. But I can certainly keep it from making a nest in my hair. You can't stop birds from flying overhead, but you can stop it from nesting in your hair. Are you with me? You can't stop noticing, but you cannot let it nest in your head. You with me? It's about the choice to let something take root. That's what Jesus is getting at. So he's saying that it's a matter that no one can see it. They can't enforce a law against it. So he's going to go right to the extreme. It's a really high bar. Just like don't be angry at anyone ever. This is a very high bar to clear. So Jesus would make this demand of his disciples in the kingdom because this is where the issue really lies, right? Think about this. This could be a response of many people today, probably in our culture. If I was talking to a bunch of people outside of the Christian world and I was talking about this might be a response. You would say, this is a private thing. The whole point is that I'm not acting on it. Nobody knows that this is happening. You don't know anything about it. It's just this thing that is in my head. It's maximize my pleasure, minimize my pain. It's what humans do. Why is this a big deal? You with me? But clearly for Jesus, this is a big deal. Because while we would say ending up in the bed is the action that's bad, Jesus goes to this extreme. He says, no. The thought, that's an action, that's a deed that you do towards somebody else. They don't know about it. Nobody else knows that it's happening. But it's a real action and a real choice, and it's a choice you make. Do you see the extreme he's taking it to? Even though no one knows, you've made a choice. So why make so seriously and such a big deal of this? So let's pause, and we're going to go to Jesus' understanding of this by looking at the scriptures. Wow, this is a big deal, and Jesus is overhauling and renovating all of our hearts and minds when it comes to this idea of sex and this big thought throughout the New Testament, right? This new kingdom, what it means to be in Jesus' community and disciples. Okay, so we're going to look at what he understands in the old scriptures. We're going to bring it there and why this is a big deal to him. It's important and a big deal to human beings, and it's a big part of the kingdom. That's why he spends, if you add divorce in there, he spends like 11 verses talking about it, and then later on in chapter 21 as well. There's a number of reasons why he gets this extreme response and why he moves like right at it. The first one comes right out of these teachings he has later when he's questioned this again. This vision of sex in the body that he inherits from the Hebrew scriptures. He believes it expresses the will of God. And so he repeats it in his own teachings, and it's the reason he cares about this issue so much. It's not about being prude. It's not teaching some unhealthy way of repressing sexual desire. Okay? Everyone hear me very clearly. The church is horrible with how it deals with this in young people. Awful. The church does horrific damage to people. Repress everything inside of you. It's dirty and disgusting and push it all down. That wouldn't be what Jesus interprets it as in any way. We're going to break it down. It's actually Christian teachers that misunderstand this Jewish context and the Hebrew roots and the teachings of Paul and Jesus about sex, that they develop this version that like sexual desire is completely evil, push it down, repress it, you're a gross human being if you even think about it ever, okay? This is a gross misunderstanding of Jesus. It's a deep distortion. So if you look at the early parts of the Bible, think of our Genesis story, way back, God's surveying and everything seems pretty good, except there's this one human there and he seems kind of it's not good. It's not very good yet. You with me? And so he's made a partner. Relationship. You see suddenly right at the very beginning, things become very good when there's two people together. It's suddenly better. We're better in a group. It's so much better when you're with people around. And it suddenly is very good. And he makes them, and he says, it's the seventh time, he says, it's very good, the two of them. There's an entire book in Jesus' Bible that the sole purpose of the book is to celebrate and explore the goodness of sex. We watched a video about it right at the very beginning. AJ, what's that book called? The book. Thanks, Courtney. Help him out. Song of Solomon. Anyone ever read it before? Yeah, okay. Blush. Right? It's a celebration. These lovers moving towards a commitment of what in Song of Solomon. It's a book about this passion. And for many people, if you read it and you don't know what to do with it, you turn it into a book about something that it's not. Here's what it's about. It's about sexual passion. That is what the book Song of Solomon is about. If you read it and you're taking much else from it, you're adding things to it that aren't there. Don't read this book if you blush easily. Don't read this book if you blush easily. In Jewish tradition, it's read in synagogue annually during Passover. So Jesus grows up hearing these poems, this Israelite poetry, some of the most graphic poetry that you could read in synagogue every single year. And the concluding paragraph is a unique poem that kind of surveys all this poetry that comes before it about these two young lovers, the shepherd and a young woman. And it concludes like this. Song of Solomon 8. If you want to... I'm not going to be able to find it very fast because it's like that one book I can never find. Song of Solomon. There we go. 8. See, I still sing the song in my head, everyone. 8. 6 through 7. Right near the end, after all these things, it says... Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Waters cannot quench it, rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned. It's a beautiful reflection on the power that this has, right? It's good. It's good. Some of the greatest good of the human experience are also very complex. They can't just be reduced to black, white, good, bad, right? And what's the metaphor, what's the image that the author uses to describe this passion? What did they compare it to? Did you hear it? It's like fire. It's like fire. Is fire good or bad? Oh, good. I would say yes. Like when someone, is fire good or bad? I'd say yes, right? It can be a great good when it's in an environment where that power is channeled towards positive, life-giving things. But when it's good, and it's in that environment, you can harness it towards human flourishing, towards human life, towards growth, towards connection, towards relationship, but the same exact power can wreak incredible destruction. There's a reason Smokey the Bear has to remind us to put out our forest fires. You with me? So is fire good or bad? It's not really the right question for fire. The point is that it's complex and it depends on the environment it's being used in. You with me? When the purpose of love within this vision that the old scriptures give us, this connected relationship, this thing, it comes together, it's the ability, this expression of human commitment, unparalleled. Right? He's saying this is an unparalleled energy, this power that happens there. Not just because of a connection. It's not just about signing a piece of paper. It's not just about saying I'm with you, you're with me. It's not about any. It's about the binding of a heart, mind, and body that can come out of this. That new families are generated and created. That communities are made and fostered. This is the vision of pages 1 and 2 that Jesus is pulling this out of, along with Song of Solomon. There's this great good. But the moment the protective environment of it is gone, the moment you pull all the stones around from the campfire and leave it blazing in the middle of woods with dry woods around it, there's a problem. Are you with me? The power that can weld two human beings together is the one that leaves the deepest emotional scars when that is broken. Jesus isn't stupid. I said last week he might be the best teacher on the planet. He's not stupid either. His view in the scriptures maybe have the highest view of human sexuality in the body. That's this utterly sacred and beautiful thing that our culture just doesn't, it treats the bodies like something completely less than what Jesus' view of it is. And the church has done horrible at understanding this. The culture would say it's just merely animal appetite or whatever. It's just kind of something that we do. But Jesus gets forceful and he gets really real about it because he says, no, there's something very much at the core that makes it part of being a human. And we're destroying it. Are you with me? I'm going to say this again because it's come up before, but probably 25 million more times as we finish up the Sermon on the Mount. But Jesus' vision of human existence, what it's about and what it's for. Matthew 22, 34 through 40. I'll summarize it as this. They ask him, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself. Or as I summarize it, know God, love neighbor, live justice forever. In part 1 and 2 of the Bible, right at the very beginning, these humans are this image of God. The closest you'll ever be to the likeness of God. Look to your left and right. That's the closest you're ever going to be to something that looks like God. Go ahead, look at him. Look at her. Yeah, you're with me. We all reflect it. The closest you'll ever get is the person sitting next to you. There's something utterly unique and sacred about human beings that reflect the images of God so that the love of God and those is reflected in that image bearing. This is what, if you remember all the way back to Genesis, that idea of being in the image bearer, that's utterly unique to humanity. It's what we exist to do. The love ethic is the core of this kingdom ideal. Love God, love neighbor, love justice forever. You ready? The core of remaking humanity is about restoring the relationships on every level with the persons closest to you. So this is why Jesus gets so worked up when this issue of lust comes up later on again. And he talks about it here. Because what's happening in your heart when you stare and you fuel that desire for another person against their will, that they don't even know what's happening. Jesus says that's a huge deal because it tells me what you think other people exist for. That action, whether you'd say it like this or not, it speaks to what you think other people exist for, maximizing your own pleasure and minimizing your own pain. That other people exist so that I can gain pleasure from them. That's a degradation of humanity, of what it means to be an image bearer. It dehumanizes you and the other person. So what you think about that person in that moment is a violation of the greatest ethic of the kingdom, because love elevates others. Love protects others and it honors them. Their dignity, their well-being. Whatever in my mind, if I degrade that humanity in any way, it ticks Jesus off. Remember me last week saying Jesus did get angry? He gets angry later on in Matthew when this comes up again. Whether it's in sex or anger, last week Jesus is intolerant of a behavior that fractures relationships and abuses other human beings because love is what we're made for. You with me? It's good when that's directed in a positive direction. But there's something about misdirected desire that changes human beings. Consciousness goes out the window. Everything you say, you believe, gets totally tossed out, and you become this impulsive, destructive, and abusive towards humans around you. You with me? So he's going right at it, and he says, this is a crime against the humanity of people. Some of us might be feeling pretty horrible about ourselves. Sometimes. Maybe even right now. But don't worry, it gets worse. Matthew 5:29, this is the quicker part. It gets worse, sorry. If your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away, for it's better for you to lose one part than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away, for it's better to lose one part than burn eternally in hell. Are you with me? It gets worse. You were feeling bad, now you're feeling even worse. Now I got to blind myself and cut off my hand? I'm not understanding this, Phil. This is typical Jesus. He's getting attention, getting images. It jolts you awake. If you were asleep while I was over here talking about intimate sex stuff, you probably jolted awake when I said gouge out your eyeball and cut your hands off. You probably were like, okay, he's on to something maybe here a little bit different. This is serious. If you ever want to think about how serious Jesus is about this, he's commanding self-mutilation as a way forward. I think it's pretty clear that self-mutilation, though, is not a legitimate resolution to this issue. Right? It's because I'm going to get there. Jesus, it's a metaphor again. Jesus is very metaphorical. He's going to get there. It's not the way forward. So question, where is the core issue of this located? Ooh, somebody say it louder. Heart. Does gouging my eyeball out and cutting my hand off fix that problem? Ooh, what's he talking about then? Does he think it will? Ripping off my hand or whatever? So most people, right? Dominant hand. How many people in here are right-handed? How many people in here are left-handed? Yeah, let's do it. Okay, which eyeball are we gouging out? If your right eye caused you to stumble, how about if you, and if your, which hand? Ooh, okay. Okay, so Jesus, he's surrounded by a bunch of people, probably right-handed as well. They're metaphors. If something seems indispensable, how many of you, if I cut off your right hand, would suddenly be like, I have to figure out how to do anything? Right-handed people, put your hands up. Put your hands up. Put them up. Okay, if it was me, it was my left hand. My left hand was cut off, I would be AJ. I don't even know what I would do, right? I do everything with this hand. It's like the most important thing. My left eye, however, is the only bad eye. So maybe if it was gouged out, I'd see better. I'm not sure, right? Be with me. Gouge out your right eye, your right hand. We'll just say cut off your right foot as well, right? Something you cannot live without. And if something you can't live without is causing your downfall, this comes from a very long Greek word. I'm not even going to bother it, but it's causing your downfall, right? It describes something that trips you up. It causes a collapse. So painfully cutting off that destructive habit is going to be better than the other alternative. You with me? You think you can't live without your right hand? Well, if it's causing a problem, get rid of it. You think you can't live without lustfully looking at people? You better figure out how to cut it out because the alternative is worse. You with me? It's metaphorical. It says Geneha in Greek. Anyway, it's the valley on the south side of Israel where the ancient leaders would burn children as sacrifices to other gods. Really great. Anyway, the Israel's prophets would often say that that's where all the evil goes. This is the image he's getting. You know that place down south where you sacrifice children? That's where you're going to end up. Reducing others to an object is rooted in something deeper in this attitude of the heart. It's like a fire that not only hurts others, but it destroys you too. So if that's the problem, get rid of it. Cut it out completely, entirely. If you're wondering where Catholics get the idea of celibacy from, it's from right here. This is where they get it from. Great. Moving on. Replace it. Get rid of it. Cut it out. Completely move on. If you can't fracture relationships because you don't know how to control fire, don't make fire anymore. You with me? Right relationships begin by treating those around me not as an object for my own desire, but as human images of God that are worthy of dignity and respect. Fire is not good or bad. Sexual desire is not good or bad. It's the environment that it's put into. It's a monster that will consume everything. The point is that it being misdirected, it becomes a black hole in the human heart instead of a wellspring of life that protects and honors and elevates others and sees their well-being. You're better than that. This is what Jesus gets. You're better than that, followers. You're better than that. God made you to be more than that. And you can become more than that because the God who loves you is completely and utterly committed to you beyond anything you could imagine. He lived for you. He's teaching. And if you follow Matthew through to the end, he's going to die. He's committed to remaking you as a human. Remember the paradox? Phil, this sounds impossible. I can't ever not be angry at people. Phil, this sounds impossible. There are pretty people in this world, and movies will play in my head. I can't stop it. It sounds impossible. It's only through one thing that it becomes possible. To be remade completely as a new human in a new kingdom. To turn to Jesus, to give it over to him. That's where this lands. That at the robe of Jesus' feet. Because I can't remake your heart. I can't. I can tell you words. Only he knows how. Let's pray.